My name is Genesis Robinson. I have the pleasure of serving as the Executive Director of Equal Ground Education Fund and Action Fund. We are a Black-led voting rights organization working throughout the entire state of Florida to increase civic engagement in Black communities. Thank you for joining us for the second annual Democracy and Social Justice Roundtable, a space we intentionally created to bring together advocates, organizers, and policy leaders to respond to the governor's State of the State address and lay out a vision for the 2026 legislative session. Before we begin, I want to say that we are deeply grateful to be joined by our partners and allies, organizations that continue to show up, to speak out, and stand firm in the fight for justice, equity, and democracy. Today, we are joined by Mr. Andrew Spar from the Florida Education Association, Ms. Pamela Birch-Fort with the Florida State Conference of the NAACP, Letitia Harmon with Florida Rising, Jonathan Scott Weber from Southern Poverty Law Center, Amy Keith with Common Cause Florida, Abdillah Skier from the American Civil Liberties, Dr. Byron Green with Justice Over Everything, Ms. Jessica Lowe Minor from the League of Women Voters of Florida, Jamil Davis with Black Voters Matter, Ms. Natasha Sutherland with Florida Watch. Each of these organizations bring deep experience, expertise, and a long-standing commitment to justice, equity, and democratic participation. A special thank you to Mr. Andrew Spar and the Florida Education Association for hosting us and continuing to stand in the fight for justice. Your commitment is essential to this moment and to this fight. Today, we stand united as democracy defense organizations, operating in a state that is actively testing how far it can go, testing the limits of voter access, testing the boundaries of inclusion, and testing whether institutions that were meant to serve the public good can be reshaped to exclude, silence, or control. These tests are playing out in real time. They're just not conversations happening in the halls of the legislature. They're making their way through policy and narratives designed to weaken civic participation. We're here because we understand what is at stake and because we refuse to meet this moment with silence. We refuse to meet this moment with fragmentation or hesitation. We are here to share information, to strengthen our alignment, and ensure that our collective response is as coordinated and resolute as the attacks that we are confronting. So at this time, we're going to now go through our panelists, and then we're going to give a response to the governor's State of the State address. And I will begin on behalf of Equal Ground Education and Action Fund. So earlier today, we heard the governor's State of the State address. It was his eighth and final such speech. Have sounded familiar. The situation and circumstances that we find ourselves in this state are anything but. What we heard was a lame duck governor who was singularly focused on control over classrooms, control over local governments, over who belongs, but most importantly, who gets a voice in our democracy. What we did not hear was any acknowledgement that Floridians are exhausted by the manufactured crisis, while real urgent problems like affordability continue to go unaddressed. We did not hear accountability. We did not hear accountability for the policies that have already caused measurable harm to voters, educators, and communities across the state, particularly communities of color. And we certainly did not hear a commitment to expanding access to our democratic institutions. Instead, we are watching this administration double down on a dangerous power grab, most clearly through its renewed push to redraw our congressional boundaries mid-decade. This effort directly defies the will of voters, who overwhelmingly demanded fair maps, transparency, and accountability. And at a time when public trust in our institutions is already fragile, this administration continues to choose consolidation of power over public trust. That matters. It matters because the tone set from the top gives permission for what we are now seeing unfold in the legislature. Aggressive voter suppression, attacks on local governance, and attempts to erase long-standing protections that exist for our democracy. And so that is why we're using this space to respond. Between our organizations, we represent the interest of millions of Floridians across the state. And we're here to put forth solutions that expand access, protect democracy, and hold those in power accountable. We're here to make clear to this administration and all 160 legislators that you will not consolidate power because the people of Florida are organized, informed, and most importantly, prepared to respond. At this time, we will now hear from Pamela Birch Fort, representing the interests of the Florida Conference of the State NAACP.
So much, Genesis, and thank you for convening us today and giving us an opportunity to respond to the governor. As you know, I represent Florida State Conference of the NAACP, which is the oldest civil rights organization in the state. Our mission is to achieve equity, political rights, and social inclusion by advancing policies and practices that expand human and civil rights, eliminate discrimination, and accelerate the well being, education, and economic security of Black people and all persons of color. Nothing that the governor said was unexpected today. And obviously, those folks represented by the NAACP were totally excluded from his comments. The governor spent time talking about the definition of free. The definition of free is very much in doubt in the state of Florida. And I disagree that that Florida represents the founding fathers sought to establish as freedom. I thought it was ironic that the governor focused on the history of the creation of the Republic of the United States, steadily moving the state of Florida toward authoritarianism. He has more authority than any governor of Florida has had, and used that authority many times over to impose his will on the Florida legislature, as he did with redistricting and as he attempted to do with immigration, and now his preemptive proclamation to schedule a special session on redistricting and property taxes, and then to accuse the left of ideological indoctrination of students when it is his administration that bans books. I know that my friend Andrew Spar will probably have some conversation about that. He continued to impose measures based on nebulous religious teachings like the Phoenix Declaration, an attempt to allow students and teachers to refuse to use pronouns of their own choice. He spoke of Florida as a state where the rule of law is upheld. Uphold the rule of law without attacking immigrants and immigrant communities. He said Florida is the only state to require local law enforcement to cooperate with ICE. That's interesting. Perhaps the other 49 states understand freedom a little differently. Is Florida safer? Immigrants contribute so much to Florida. They are teachers, business persons, preachers, construction and agricultural workers, and mostly taxpayers. What will ultimately become of Florida with no immigrants? He seems to believe that he's helping people by reducing the taxes local governments depend on to actually assist taxpayers. He mentioned medical authoritarianism. It seems his administration is destroying public health by eliminating vaccinations. Whose informed consent is necessary in the realm of public health and safety? Nothing to address what people are really struggling with: food insecurity, affordable, safe housing, and stable rent, reasonable utility cost. The governor totally ignored frivolous spending, like his migrant flights, massive funding to a voluntary unit called the State Guard, stealing Medicaid funds to attack a process initiated by citizens, and calling for unconstitutional mid decade redistricting, and then using taxpayer funds to defend it in court, continuing the process of passing along taxpayer funds to his friends and appointees. I don't think this governor is aware of what Floridians really need. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Letitia Harmon. I am the Senior Director of Policy and Research here representing Florida Rising. And Florida Rising is a statewide independent political advocacy organization. Our mission is to build broader multiracial movements with individuals from historically marginalized communities. So we organize throughout the state in communities that are Black, Brown, immigrant, and low income in order to build political power and have the people who are most impacted by the laws that are passed by this legislature learn the impact of those laws, learn how to engage their legislators, and learn how to advocate for themselves and for the issues that impact everyday Floridians. We strive to develop leaders who will shift power to our communities, allowing us to shape our own destinies. And when I listened to the state of the state delivered by the governor today, it really seemed that we were living in two separate Floridas. The one he described is not the one I recognize and not the one that I live in. Today, on the first day of Florida's legislative session, we are here and we are standing united with the most impacted, most marginalized communities in Florida to demand real solutions for Floridians, not political theater, not a tax on our communities, but bold policies that actually prioritize economic and housing justice. Governor DeSantis and historically the state legislators have continued to side with corporate landlords, with billionaires, with developers, wealthy special interests, and they ignore the daily struggles of millions of Floridians. Rather than investing in real solutions, such as rent stabilization or holding bad landlords accountable when they break the law, rather than implementing tenant protections, rather than protecting immigrant families. What we have seen is a gutting of local protections. They've preempted community driven housing policies. And they've allowed unchecked greed to basically dictate how people live, where they live, and how much utilities cost. What we see consistently happening is the cost of living going up in Florida, and yet the governor is here bragging about the cost of living in Florida, when he in bragging about even a program in the Everglades, when it is his administration that appropriated emergency FEMA funds to build an illegal detention center in the Everglades. He's bragging about prosperity while millions of Floridians are struggling and spending far above 30% of their income on their housing costs. He continues to appoint lackeys and cronies to judicial positions. He just did another one today with the appointment of John Gard to the Florida State Supreme Court. And so what we see is this continued pattern of ignoring people who are actually impacted and just major handouts to big donors and to wealthy corporate interests. What we would rather see in the state of Florida, and we're hoping that the legislators are listening to this, rather than listening to the governor, listen to your constituents. Listen to the fact that they are telling you the rent is too darn high. Listen to the fact that they are telling you our utility rates are about to spike because just had yet another massive spike approved that is going to increase utility costs for the entire state of Florida. Families are being separated. Families are afraid to take their children to school or to educational programs because of draconian policies that are demonizing people and meaning it's not safe even to be a citizen in this state. We're tired of seeing all of the governor's all of the people who disagree with the governor handpicked as his enemies, and then policies passed that will attack them, that will make living here harder and less affordable. What we want to see is something better. We don't want to stand by while the lawmakers just continue to ignore what your constituents have been telling you. So, to Governor DeSantis and to the legislature, we are mobilizing, we are organizing, we will hold you accountable at the ballot box. So, let me be very clear. Every person in this state, not just the wealthy ones, not just the one who are your buddies and your cronies and who will pass judicial decisions that benefit you personally, everyone deserves a safe, affordable place to call home. Florida belongs to all of us, not just the privileged few. Thank you.
And good afternoon. I am Andrew Spar, an elementary music teacher from Daytona Beach, currently serving as the president of the Florida Education Association. The Florida Education Association represents educators in the state of Florida, teachers and support staff in our pre-K through 12 public schools, as well as professors at all of Florida's universities, and the majority of Florida's colleges, and graduate assistants at Florida's universities as well. I listened to the governor's speech today, and I thought about before he spoke what I was hoping to hear, what I think most Floridians wanted to hear, was how are you going to help us achieve the American dream? How are you going to make life easier for us? And I heard nothing about that. I heard him talk in the area of education about how teachers are allegedly receiving these record salary increases. Ironically, the Commissioner of Education made that exact comment the other day. In the Florida Education Association, we put out a poll on social media to our members, and we asked how many of them thought they have been receiving record salary increases. And well over 1,200 people responded, and not a single one of them, surprisingly, felt that they have received record salary increases. In fact, this year, the average increase in pay for teachers and staff in the state of Florida has been under 2%. And I don't think any Floridian would think that that is a record salary increase. And what it underscores is how out of touch this governor is with the reality of everyday Floridians. He celebrates making it harder for us. He celebrated the fact that teachers and staff in Florida's public schools and our professors at the universities have a harder time coming together to advocate for our students and their families, for our communities. He celebrates the fact that it is harder for us to be able to advocate for better pay and better health care, for addressing the massive teacher and staff shortage, which as of today, there are literally thousands of vacancies in Florida's public schools, meaning students, your children, your grandchildren, nieces and nephews, your neighbors, kids, are in classrooms without professionally trained certified teachers, or they're not receiving the services that are guaranteed under federal law for students with disabilities. I didn't hear the governor address those issues today. I didn't hear him talk about a brighter future for Floridians. I didn't hear him talk about you.
Thank you so much. And good afternoon. My name is Jonathan Weber. I'm the Florida Policy Director for the Southern Poverty Law Center, a nonpartisan nonprofit. The SPLC is a catalyst for racial justice in the South and beyond. Communities to dismantle white supremacy, strengthen intersectional movements, and advance the human rights of all people. So watching the governor's speech this morning, quote, he was bragging that Florida has one, if not the lowest levels of spending per capita in the nation, and the number of state government workers per capita are less than half the national average and the lowest in all of these United States. Well, what does that tell me? It tells me that the government not meeting the needs of its residents by design. With failure of leadership from DC. I'm going to talk about it when we get but the impacts of the One Big Beautiful Bill Act not be under serious problems happening, and this government seem to be ready to meet that need.
My name is. I want to say thank you to Equal Ground for organizing the roundtable to do critical issues facing Florida. Heard from the governor. Common Cause is a nonpartisan organization uphold rights, protection, and fair representation, anti-corruption and AI on our civil rights. High notes. The corruption of no bid contracts, not a government stripping away of self-governance from local communities, centralized necessary barriers that have been erected to make it harder for Florida to vote. We didn't hear about how his government has censored the experiences and histories of our Black, Brown, and LGBTQ communities. And we didn't hear about how much more expensive it has become for everyday people to live in Florida. His agenda, in fact, has been a hand up. We heard about a hand up today. His agenda has been a hand up for the rich and for corporations, and has left the rest of us behind. As an independent voice of the people, Common Cause hopes that the legislature will listen to the people and not to Governor DeSantis to focus this session on issues that will make Florida a safe and affordable place for all Floridians, not a corrupt playground for the rich.
Thank you, Equal Ground and the partners that are here today. I'm with the American Civil Liberties Union of Florida. Our is to protect, defend, and promote the constitutional rights and civil liberties of all people in Florida. We envision a fair and a just state where all people are free, equal under the law, and can live with dignity. Now, just like everyone else here, I listened to the governor's State of the State speech. I watched him standing there in his ill-fitting suit talking about, it's called a tailor, I'm sorry. Really hard for me to square with reality. About the supposed teacher bill of rights. He said, quote, have a right to educate. And I find it country is an education initiative. Exist in their own initiative. Currently being investigated for spending bet Viola against the state's immigration detention center, middle of the that was mentioned that local governments collaborate with ICE. He mentioned that local governments are forced to collaborate with ICE. And I say, look at what's happening around the country with regards to ICE. You're not. Americans and Floridians don't want ICE streets, agents yanking people into unmarked vehicles, We don't want a secret police to do President Trump's bidding. We want ICE out of our communities for good. Thank you.
Dang, y'all want me to go after that? Gee whiz. Hello, friends. My name is Dr. Byron Green Collish. I am the co-executive director of Justice Over Everything. It's a nonprofit social justice center that prioritizes civic education and resilience. We recognize advocacy built for the most marginalized amongst us benefits all of us. We believe deeply in building and fortifying resilient and informed community members, coalition building. So we work to support organizations here around this table and across the state of Florida, and actively challenge systems that are not built for our success while supporting those that are ensnarled in the justice system. And as I sat here today, I was incredibly excited to be amongst so many amazing policy and justice leaders that I was blown away. And I wish I would have had that feeling sitting in the state of the state. I did not. To be clear, a state obsessed with policing identity is a state distracted from solving real problems. For the last 7 years, we focused on culture war positioning. The administration has continued to portray efforts against, quote, woke initiatives and DEI programming in state agencies and the loss of local government autonomy as victories. And as somebody that spent years doing a dissertation on DEI, let me tell you, that is a false narrative. Facts are facts, friends. We know that local governments are the closest to communities and understand how diversity can fortify and even bolster our communities. We watched that happen as our communities resisted through 2 hurricanes and came together to support each other all the way through. We witnessed continued attacks at anti-trans legislation. This administration has led the charge in further marginalizing 1% of our community. Let me be very clear, that is 1% of the American population identifies as trans or non-binary. They have portrayed restrictions on gender-affirming care, relating policies as public safety or child protection measures, even in the face of legal challenges, taking it a step further to tout parental choice, but only when it aligns with their view. And to take it even further, the standard of woman has been based on white women that continues to put Black women at the crosshairs of anti-trans legislation. Educational censorship and curriculum control. He framed education reforms as protecting parents and children, but protecting children should never require erasing their classmates, their families, or themselves from history. The continued restrictions and discussions on gender identity, sexual orientation, and race in schools as protecting parental rights and traditional values rather than what they really are is harmful censorship. Laws like the Don't Say Gay bill and now the Don't Say Trans at Work bill continue to pervade this administration. To be clear, Black history and LGBTQ history did not start a culture war, but they have survived every culture war in our country's history and they will continue to survive. What we didn't hear in this conversation was about the confusion caused by bad bills like the Don't Say Gay bill that I mentioned earlier, and how that has ratcheted up the political rhetoric around how LGBTQ plus people live and exist in our state. We didn't hear about the 26 trans and non-binary people that have been murdered in this state in the governor's tenure. We also did not hear about the ongoing HIV epidemic that is ravishing our state. This is a critical public health crisis largely absent from the state discourse. We heard a great deal about medical freedom and informed consent, but nothing about HIV. And Florida, again, continues to have one of the highest rates of HIV diagnosis in the country, with thousands of new infections annually and persistent disparities among Black, Hispanic, and LGBTQ plus communities. I want to say that one more time, that this state has one of the highest rates of HIV diagnosis in the nation. This silence is not neutrality, it's straight out neglect. Locally, like in Pinellas County, where I happen to live, and even here in Tallahassee, we've seen rising rates of HIV, prompting community efforts focused on testing, prevention, and education. And public health advocates warn that prevention and treatment programs face funding uncertainty at a very moment increased investment and comprehensive public health approaches are needed. We have watched public funding disappear from our communities that advocate for HIV awareness, and we continue to see new cases pervade our state. So let me be clear. While I am not surprised by the remarks that we heard today, I do know for certain that the people of Florida deserve a future that reflects us all and protects us all.
Thank you. My name is Jessica Lowe Miner, and I'm the president of the League of Women Voters of Florida. I was struck while listening to the governor's speech by this quote. He said, "While words can be meaningful, it is deeds that are ultimately the most powerful. Results are what matter the most." And I actually found myself agreeing with that statement. Words are meaningful, but it is deeds that are ultimately the most powerful. However, here in Florida, we are experiencing a very stark difference between the words that are being said by our elected officials and the results that we are experiencing in our lived reality and on the ground. For instance, the governor loves to extol the free state of Florida, but those words are not the real results. The governor praised the state's civics education efforts, but we have experienced repeated and blatant efforts to undermine our constitutional rights here in Florida. Currently, the League of Women Voters of Florida is fighting a law, HB 1205, that was passed by the legislature and signed by the governor last year. We know that we have a constitutional right guaranteed by the First Amendment to petition our government. And yet, just last year, the state legislature passed and the governor signed a law that makes it nearly impossible for citizens like those of us in the room, our organizations, our volunteers, to collect petitions and to ultimately seek to redress their grievances by advancing a matter to the ballot for their fellow voters to make a decision on. That law makes it incredibly difficult for anyone who would like to collect 25 or more petitions. It requires people to register with the state of Florida and provide personal details, including their name, their social security number, to the state in order to exercise their First Amendment right. And it even prohibits certain categories of citizens from participating in the process at all. And so here we are in what should be the free state of Florida, finding ourselves not being able to exercise constitutional rights that were guaranteed as part of our founding documents in the US Constitution. The other thing that I found interesting today was the presence of the absence. I think Pamela Birchford also mentioned this, of any statements related to redistricting. Obviously, that is a major issue here in the state of Florida, and one that has almost entirely been fabricated by our governor, not something that is required by the courts at this time, and not something that the state of Florida should be seeking to engage in. And I thought that it was interesting that that issue was not brought up as part of the governor's remarks at all today. So as we're approaching the session and it's getting underway, the League of Women Voters is going to be monitoring anything that impacts our democracy or our constitutional rights very closely. We're excited to be at the table with this incredible group of advocates, and we hope that everyone will stay tuned as the session commences. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Jamil Davis, and I am proud to serve as the North Florida League Regional Organizer for Black Voters Matter. We are a national voting rights organization working in 27 states to increase power in marginalized, predominantly Black communities. Governor DeSantis' State of the State address was absurd and completely out of touch with more than 4 million of the state's residents. DeSantis talked about education, climate, emergency management, public safety, affordability, and immigration, but failed to include the 4 million plus Black residents in the state's overall assessment. DeSantis has been consistent with his repressive, anti-Black policies and has proven time and again that he doesn't care about Black people and never did. I'm reminded that Maya Angelou once said, "When someone shows you who they are, believe them." His State of the State address reminds us why our work is so urgent. He continues to push policies that attack Black history in schools, while ongoing teacher shortages and the refusal to expand Medicaid leave too many in our communities without the education and health care they deserve. More recently, across the country in Republican controlled states, racial gerrymandering continues to dilute Black voting power. In our recent report published with Fair Fight Action, we raised the impact of voter suppression and unfair rigged voting maps to undermine Black voters that could soon impact the state of Florida. We're responding with initiatives that continue to ground our work from voter engagement in education, healthcare access, environmental justice, youth voter engagement, and now adding community safety. Through these efforts, we're making sure our communities are respected and protected because at the end of the day, we got us.
Good afternoon. Natasha Seth. Accountable when they and instead decide to support law and policies that make it harder for us to have healthy, safe, and prosperous lives. While I'm happy to be in this room with so many amazing advocates, and I'm incredibly thankful to our friends in the media that have decided to cover this event, I'm also profoundly disappointed that it's even necessary for us to be here at all. As our lame duck governor was speaking today, all I could do was reflect on the many opportunities to improve the lives of hardworking families and seniors that have been missed over the last 8 years under his lack of leadership. Because the truth of the matter is this: while the governor's been focused on himself, his own political ambitions, the state of Florida, all the while, has become way too expensive for the rest of us. We all work hard. Floridians work hard for the same reasons, right? Safety, dignity, respect, and ultimately a better life for our families and for ourselves. But instead, what we've gotten from this governor has been a constant stream of attacks, as you've heard from my colleagues, that really generate headlines for himself and distract the rest of us, hardworking people, from the very real cost of living crisis that his policies themselves have created. As families across our state work hard every single day to afford the rising cost of groceries, insurance, housing, spending their precious time away from their loved ones, right, just to put food on the table and a roof over their heads, Ron DeSantis has actually used and weaponized state government as a means for massive giveaways of taxpayer dollars to his greedy campaign donors and to let large multinational corporations avoid paying their fair share. While working Floridians and seniors are dealing with this affordability crisis, as we've all discussed, the governor has used our tax dollars, our hard-earned tax dollars, as his own personal piggy bank in the Hope Florida scandal to fight against the will of the people that he, in fact, was elected to serve. And as storms become stronger, natural disasters strike more frequently, particularly here in the state of Florida, the governor sided not with the people, but with insurance corporations that are denying legitimate claims when families are dealing with a crisis by making it almost impossible not only to hold these companies accountable, but to get what we are owed and what we have paid for. The unfortunate reality is that corrupt dealmakers have been taking over our home state. Working families and seniors are paying the price. But I believe that the people of our state deserve better. We deserve leaders who will put politics aside to build a brighter future for all of us, with practical solutions that are going to actually lower costs, raise our wages, protect our incredible and diverse environment, and root out corruption that has been festering in our government to put hardworking Floridians and seniors first above everything else. Because we don't have to agree on everything to work together, and no one has to lose for all of us to ultimately win. And so I hope that our elected leaders take this message to heart, all of our messages to heart, over the next 60 days. And I implore them to actually have the courage to do what is right by us, the people of Florida.
Thank you, Natasha, and to everyone else for sharing your response to the governor's state of the state of Georgia. With this being the start of legislative session, I think it's appropriate that we now take time to talk about our legislative priorities. We heard the governor's vision for this session. However, we want to now lay out what our expectation is on behalf of the communities that we represent. And so I will start with Equal Ground's 2026 legislative priorities. And so as Florida's 2026 legislative session commences, lawmakers have already filed nearly 2,000 bills touching almost every aspect of life here in the state of Florida. And while not every proposal will become law, we know that the decisions that are made during this session will have a lasting consequence on our communities. The next 60 days will shape the future of Florida's democracy, and every Floridian should be paying close attention to what is happening inside the Capitol. So for the 2026 legislative session, Equal Ground is focused on three core priorities. One, stopping voter suppression bills that limit access to the ballot box and create new barriers for eligible voters. Two, pushing back against coordinated attacks designed to exclude, silence, or erase entire communities from public life and civic participation. And three, championing pro-democracy legislation such as the Harry T. and Harriet V. Moore Florida Voting Rights Act to ensure that Floridians have a fair opportunity to elect leaders who reflect their values, but also advance policies that improve their quality of life. I wanted to begin by talking about the threat to voting access. So this legislative session, much like the last few legislative sessions, we continue to see a coordinated threat to voting access in the state of Florida. At the center of these efforts are bills like HB 991, Senate Bill 1334, and House Bill 985 that make it harder to register to vote, to remain on the rolls, and successfully cast a ballot, particularly in Black and Brown communities, for our seniors, our students, and individuals in low-income situations. House Bill 991 is so dangerous, it creates a system where eligibility is no longer enough to vote. Under this bill, eligible voters whose citizenship can't be legitimized or confirmed could potentially be blocked from voting altogether. This is an arbitrary creation of rules to fix a problem that does not exist. This is not election integrity. This is administrative disenfranchisement. However, these efforts to exclude are not limited to voting alone. The same mindset that wishes to exclude people from our ballot box is the same that is fueling the attack on diversity, equity, and inclusion across Florida. First, it was education. Now we see bills filed this session that reach into local government, public institutions, boards, commissions, and community-based decision-making spaces, fundamentally reshaping how equity and inclusion are treated in law and practice. For example, House Bill 1001 and Senate Bill 1134 prohibit counties and municipalities from funding, promoting, or advancing any real diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, effectively banning DEI in offices, policies, and programs at the local level. Senate Bill 1114 and Senate Bill 6013 repeal long-standing requirements related to minority representation on boards and commissions, councils, and committees throughout the state. And then you have House Bill 1189, which further restricts DEI and affirmative action practices in state employment. And for these reasons is why pro-democracy legislation like the Harry T. and Harriet V. Moore Florida Voting Rights Act matters. The brainchild of the late Senator Geraldine Thompson and now sponsored by Senator LaVon Bracey Davis and Representative Rashawn Young, Senate Bill 1598 and House Bill 1419 is a necessary safeguard for our democracy. named after two icons who are among the greatest Floridians to ever call Florida home. The Florida VRA recognizes that discrimination does not always announce itself. It provides real tools to challenge suppression before the harm becomes permanent, rather than after elections, after things have already been compromised. The Florida Voting Rights Act would expand access to the ballot box by establishing Election Day as a holiday, authorizing same day voter registration, and implementing automatic voter registration. It would strengthen vote by mail access, repealing the requirement of Senate Bill 90 to request your vote by mail ballot every election cycle, and ensuring that vote by mail requests are permanent as well as have prepaid postage. So that's not a deterrent for people casting their ballot. It would protect returning citizens by creating a centralized and transparent database that clearly determines voter eligibility. It would restore fairness in election administration by repealing anti voter laws that have created deliberate barriers at nearly every stop of the voting process, from registering to casting your final vote. It would disband the Office of Elections, Crime, and Security, which, if we're being honest, has been used more as a tool to intimidate rather than protect elections. It would guard against vote dilution by enacting protections against state and local policies that weaken or drown out the voices of Black and Brown constituents. And as we see a renewed push for mid decade redistricting, we know that is certainly something that we need in our state. It would ensure language access by requiring election officials to provide materials and assistance to non native English speakers in all counties throughout the state, not just some. And it would reinstate critical pre-clearance protections. With the Voting Rights Act under attack at the federal level, we need a state level review process that is independent and ensures that ensures jurisdictions with the history of discrimination prove that their voting changes will not harm our marginalized communities. And then lastly, this would reduce voter intimidation and abuse of the system by eliminating and limiting frivolous mass voter challenges so that we can strengthen protections to ensure that we fight off political extremism. So as redistricting, voter verification, and election administration are completely weaponized in this state, we know that Florida can't rely on reactive solutions alone. And that is why this session, Equal Ground has made the commitment, as we have done in recent years, to physically be present in Tallahassee. We recently brought on a new legislative associate, Ms. Kiera Nixon, who will help lead our advocacy efforts in Tallahassee every day to ensure that we're on the ground, in the rooms where decisions are being made, attending meetings, speaking on the record, and holding lawmakers accountable. Because we're here to hold the line. We're here to push back in real time and ensure that the voices and the interests of our communities are not ignored, sidelined, or erased. And so at this time, we will now again hear from Ms. Attorney Pamela Birch-Fort, representing the NAACP.
Thank you, Genesis. And I think it's fair to say, as I start out here, the Florida NAACP will adopt and appropriate the priorities of all our partners here today in our organizations, because we're here to fight. And I think you all are all fired up as I am. However, one of the main priorities, and we have lots of priorities in the NAACP, one of our main priorities of the Florida NAACP is to defend the right to vote and preserve easy access to the ballot. In recent years, as attacks on election administration and democratic processes have increased, the need for voting rights protections must also increase. The U.S. Supreme Court has noted that voting is a fundamental right because it is preservative of all other rights. Voting is the citizens' link to their laws and government and the essence of a democratic society. The court further said If the right to vote is undermined, all other rights are illusory. In a democracy, safeguarding the right to vote is a fundamental matter. Florida has a troubling long history of racial discrimination in voting. I wish I could say that that history was old history, that the Jim Crow era has been left in the dust. Sadly, we are reliving Jim Crow 2.0. Florida has passed a cascade of devastating voting laws in very recent years. In 2019, after the citizens of Florida expanded voting rights of returning citizens, the Florida legislature all but took those rights away, requiring citizens to pay all fines and fees before they could vote, without even providing an adequate means of even knowing what fines and fees are owed. Then there were bills to reduce the number of drop boxes available, even changing the name of drop boxes, limiting the time for vote by mail ballots to be valid, reducing the number of ballots individuals can possess at any given time, restricting the activity of third party voter registration organizations, bills imposing excessively high fines and fees for mere mistakes. There were bills creating a specialized law enforcement unit, as Genesis has mentioned, designed to terrorize citizens, arrest citizens, all in the name of protecting the right to vote. Bills that nearly destroyed the ability of Florida citizens to amend their own constitution. Bills attempting to force citizens to obtain expensive documents and comply with unworkable requirements to prove they are citizens, and then forcing the legislature to destroy black congressional districts. Florida NAACP, again, as all the organizations here today, will continue to advocate for the Harry T. and Harriet V. Moore Florida Voting Rights Act of 2026 to return Florida to a panacea of safe, efficient, and fair voting laws and voting access, and to vigorously push back on the proposed unconstitutional mid decade redistricting. Today, you will continue to hear from some of my colleagues here, as you did from Genesis, who will further elaborate on some of the heinous voting laws proposed for the 2026 legislative session.
Thank you very much, Pamela. And Florida Rising, same as the NAACP and Equal Ground, is also prioritizing the passage of the Harry T. and Harriet V. Moore Voting Rights Act. Florida Rising is a member led organization, which means that our legislative agenda is voted on and approved by our member base, of which we have approximately 1,000 in the state of Florida. And so my legislative agenda is set by the members of Florida Rising, and they continue to prioritize the protection of and expanding of voting rights, which is why we're continuing to support the Harry T. and Harriet V. Moore Voting Rights Act. Another priority for our members, especially considering the environment that we are in this year, is immigration justice. Our families should be able to live without fear. And so we are prioritizing the passage of the Economic Prosperity and Immigration Act, which will make Florida a more prosperous state for all people, especially immigrant communities. In previous years, there has been legislation passed that is not only an attack on families and their sense of well-being and safety, their ability to feel welcomed and belonging in Florida, but it is even an these are even anti-prosperity policies. They're attacking the economic infrastructure of Florida. So not only are we separating families and attacking freedoms, but we're actually undermining our ability to be economically prosperous. And so the Economic Prosperity and Immigration Act seeks to address all of these things and ensure that those students who attend state colleges, regardless of their immigration status, can receive can receive in-state tuition. It would provide protection from discrimination based on immigration status, which is in the Florida Civil Rights Act of 1992. And it would prohibit law enforcement from insisting in immigration operations from wearing masks and trying to disguise their identity. It would require them to identify themselves as law enforcement and also require federal agents to identify themselves. Another priority for Florida Rising members has to do with the rate of investor-owned utilities. And this is something that, so I'm from Jacksonville, and in Jacksonville, we have municipally owned utilities, which means that any profit made from our utilities goes back into the community. Investor-owned utilities cover the majority of the state of Florida and include like FPL, Duke, TECO, and when there is profit from these investor-owned utilities, that profit just goes to make wealthy investors even wealthier. It does not get reinvested in our community. And what has happened historically in Florida is that whenever these utility companies go to the Public Service Commission and request utility rate hikes, which raises our cost of utilities as Floridians, it's approved. No questions asked, no evidence demanded, no justification for this rate hike. It's simply signed off on. And so what we are advocating for is that there be greater transparency and accountability within the Public Service Commission itself, which is who approves these rate hikes for utilities throughout the state. That is something that would address long-held concerns over how these things are approved, what the public knows about it. We want more transparency and opportunity for the public to engage with this. And so we are hoping to see really strong legislation around that. I'll also just comment briefly that defensively, other folks are going to cover this in more detail. So I will just mention that we are very concerned about any efforts to pass documentary proof of citizenship in order to register to vote. That is something that has been litigated in other states. It has been decided it should not be proposed, and yet here it is. Another concern that we have is the reduction or elimination of property taxes, which, if enacted, would eliminate essential programs, would severely cut local government funding, and would really not benefit middle and working class homeowners at all. It would just be a gift card to corporate and wealthy property owners, essentially. So we will be opposing that and hope that the devastating impacts of that will be understood by the legislature this year.
Okay, and again, I'm Andrew Spar, president of the Florida Education Association. At the Florida Education Association, we have three critical priorities this year. First is to ensure competitive salaries, healthcare, and retirement benefits for the individuals who work in Florida's public schools and at our Florida's public universities and colleges. Second, we believe we have to work to retain and recruit highly qualified educators. And third, we must protect the academic freedoms as well as providing a safe and secure working and learning environments for educators and students in the state. So how do we do that? Well, we do that through a variety of ways. First of all, we have to make sure that public schools, which are your schools, have the funding they need to meet the needs of every student, to address the issues that we have with teacher pay, which ranks 50th in the nation out of the 50 states and Washington, D.C., and pay for our support staff. Second, we have to make sure that public school dollars stay in public schools. This continuation of the siphoning off of public school taxpayer dollars to private for-profit entities continues to deprive students in the state of Florida of the education that our Constitution requires and that our morals demand. So we have to make sure that those dollars stay in our public schools. We also have to make sure that our teachers are free to teach. They have to be able to interact with their students, to relate to their students, to understand their students. Because a child who does not feel seen, does not feel safe, does not feel loved, will never learn. And too many laws are in our way of preventing us from being able to do what students need. I wish I had my books with me that I carry around this state on a regular basis. But in 1998, in the state of Florida, there were 680 plus pages of law that public schools had to follow. 680. Today, There are 1,408 pages of laws that public schools have to follow. As an aside, there are 68 pages for charter schools. There are 19 pages for vouchers. There is a huge inequity that has occurred and a massive burden that has been placed on our public schools that is intentional. And we want to push back on that. So there are bills to address some of these inequities. Senator Gates has a bill in the Senate to address the inequity of funding between public schools and vouchers. There is legislation to address the burden that is on school districts and teachers and staff in our schools with unfair pay. Over 20 laws that govern how teachers are paid in the state of Florida. There's a bill, several bills, to fix that by Senator, thank you, Ana Maria Rodriguez and Senator Caladiud, as well as in the House by Representative Karen Gonzalez Pittman Gonzalez. And so we have to fix that. And then we have to lift up Senator Corey Simon's bill to address some of the burden that are on public schools, to reduce some of the laws, to strike a lot of those laws and hopefully reduce the number of pages, but also to bring job security back for teachers with multi-year contracts. And the House sponsor on that bill is Representative Smith. So there are bills out there, there is hope out there to address some of the challenges that we have, but it is going to take the will of lawmakers and the power of the people to make the kinds of changes we need this session.
Thank you so much, Andrew. So this year, the Southern Poverty Law Center is focused on minimizing the harm caused by the federal One Big Beautiful Bill Act, which was signed into law last summer. The stakes in Florida are enormous. According to Feeding America, more than 3.2 including over 800,000 children, experience food insecurity. Those most affected include veterans, seniors, unhoused people, Black and Hispanic communities, and low-income households. These federal cuts are hitting at a moment of real economic pain. About 12% of Floridians live below the poverty line. More than 1 in 10 Florida households experiences food insecurity, and 19% of renter households have incomes below 30% of area median income, leaving many families severely cost-burdened and at serious risk of housing instability. The One Big Beautiful Bill Act cuts food and poverty assistance at the exact moment Florida families are least able to absorb the loss. The law threatens core federal nutrition programs that Floridians rely on every day, including school lunch programs, SNAP, and WIC. It cuts roughly $186 billion from SNAP nationwide and shifts major new costs onto states over the next few years. In Florida, that could mean hundreds of millions of dollars in new administrative costs and potentially billions in benefit costs, putting the stability of the entire program at risk. Now, these programs are not siloed. SNAP eligibility automatically qualifies children for free school meals and establishes income eligibility for WIC. When SNAP is cut or disrupted, families do not just lose grocery assistance. Children can lose automatic access to school meals, and families with young children face new barriers to WIC. That is how a cut to one program cascades across the entire food assistance system. Food assistance programs have long had a bipartisan support because they work. The U.S. Department of Agriculture estimates that every dollar invested in food security programs generates about $1.50 in local economic activity. These programs support families and grocery stores, farmers, and local economies across the state. Protecting food security is not just the right thing to do, it is sound economic policy. And that is why we urge the Florida legislature to act with urgency this session. Lawmakers should fully fund these food security programs, remove unnecessary administrative barriers, and ensure participation in programs like summer EBT. They should modernize their access systems and urge congressional action to reduce these harmful federal cuts. But the harm caused by the One Big Beautiful Bill does not stop with food assistance. The same law and the same congressional decisions are undermining healthcare access for all Floridians. Florida continues to see widespread Medicaid coverage loss without adequate safeguards. Hundreds of thousands of Floridians have lost coverage in recent years, often not because they are ineligible, but because of administrative barriers. Children, seniors, people with disabilities, and working families have been hit the hardest. Although Florida's Medicaid redetermination period has ended, lawmakers have failed to take corrective action. Coverage has not been restored, administrative systems have not been fixed, and too many eligible people are still falling through the cracks. At the same time, Congress has failed to extend the Affordable Care Act's enhanced premium tax credits, driving up premiums for Floridians who rely on the ACA marketplace and forcing many families to pay more or risk going uninsured entirely. Taken together, these choices create a double hit. Families are losing access to food assistance while also facing higher healthcare costs. Parents are being forced to choose between groceries, rent, and medical care. And these sad outcomes are predictable results of poor policy decisions. So today is the first day of the legislative session. And while Florida lawmakers cannot undo federal harm on their own, they can act. I was heartened to hear Senator Alberton in his opening comments today talk about this a little bit. I'm looking forward to his leadership over the next 60 days. The legislature overall must mitigate these impacts wherever possible, protect access to food and health care, and use its voice to demand federal reforms that reverse these damaging cuts.
Thank you. This year, Common Cause will be watching legislation around artificial intelligence regulation, government accountability, and civil liberties. However, our top legislative priorities this year in this critical midterm election year are protecting voters, our elections, and fair representation. Here we are advocating for election season. It is essential that we ensure that all Florida voters across this state who have been affected by a disaster have equal opportunities to vote in upcoming elections, regardless of what county they. What we saw in 2024 was that those equal opportunities to vote were not available in all counties. The Elections During Emergencies bill, which is HB 1191 and SB 1416 as its Senate companion, will provide critical flexibility and resources for supervisors of elections to respond rapidly to disasters that occur within 60 days of an election. Florida supervisors of elections know how to respond after hurricanes. They've had a lot of practice in responding after hurricanes. They know how to respond after hurricanes with proven and tested measures that have been used in Florida for years. It is just common sense to get rid of unnecessary hurdles and delays so that they can respond more quickly to the needs of their community and make sure that all of the voters in their counties are able to vote. Now, these policies received very strong bipartisan support last session, and we hope to see that again this year, because ultimately no Florida voter should be disenfranchised by a natural disaster. This year, we will also work together with many of our partners here, as you've heard say, that, okay, sorry, technical issue. Okay. All right, I got you. All right, there we go. So this year, like many of our partners here, we'll also be working to uphold the Fair Districts Amendments and prevent illegal gerrymandering of Florida's congressional districts for partisan gain, whether it is attempted during the regular session this year or in a special session later this spring. But perhaps most importantly, because this is a critical midterm election year, we will fight against any efforts to remove eligible U.S. citizens from the voter rolls or prevent eligible U.S. citizens from being registered to vote. House Bill 991 and its Senate companion, SB 1334, propose to do just that. Put simply, they threaten the voting status of eligible U.S. citizens across Florida. These bills would require thousands of eligible citizens to jump over red tape hurdles and shell out money to pay for documents just to be able to vote. Now, lots of Floridians, as we know, do not have a passport or their original birth certificate handy or proof of the name change from back when they got married. And getting replacements to those documents is expensive, burdensome, and time-consuming. And let me reiterate, expensive. Worse yet, these costs would fall most heavily on the very Floridians who are already struggling with the skyrocketing cost of living in our states, as we have been hearing throughout this session. Seniors, young people, lower income Floridians who are struggling with rent and groceries and healthcare and I don't know what else, utilities, everything has been going up. The last thing they need is another expense. And they certainly shouldn't have that added expense to exercise their right to vote as Americans. Now, let's be clear. It is already illegal for non citizens to vote in Florida, and the consequences of doing so are extremely harsh. That is not what these bills are about. These bills are about which citizens the Florida legislator wants voting and which citizens the Florida legislator does not want voting. This is about making voting harder for the Floridians who are being left behind so that our elected officials are not held accountable for things like the affordability crisis. We have to stop these bills. Our elected officials should be held accountable for making Florida a state that we can all live in. Thank you.
Thank you. As I said, the mission of the ACLU of Florida is to protect, defend, strengthen, and promote the constitutional rights and civil liberties of all people. And so, in addition to all of the great issues and bills that our partners here are going to be working on, we will also be working on other issues because despite the moniker, the free state of Florida, that the governor and our leadership has given our state, it frankly hasn't proven to be true. So there are some bad bills that we are currently tracking. I'll just give a few highlights because there are quite a number. Senate Bill 1044, House Bill 993 would limit access to IVF services. Senate Bill, I'm sorry, all over the place. House Bill 347 and Senate Bill 426 would ban certain flags from being displayed in publicly owned buildings, because a pride flag being flown in an office is one of the most pressing issues that are currently facing Floridians today. And if you can't detect the sarcasm, I'll just say it out loud. That was a joke. There are a few good bills, though. For example, Senate Bill 790, Bill 677, the Freedom to Learn Act, would undo a lot of the harmful legislation that's passed over the last few years. The governor earlier today in his State of the State address talked about the classroom freedom. And I find that hard to square with the reality that Florida leads the nation in book bans and censorship in the classroom. And this undoes a lot of that and ensures that politicians are kept out of the classroom and teachers are allowed to teach our entire history, good, bad, and ugly. Reinstate tuition for undocumented Floridians that was cruelly taken away last year. And again, I find that hard to square with the reality that that was passed into law just 10 years ago by many of the same folks in that building. Takes politicians out of the doctor's office and allows Floridians to make decisions about their own bodies and their own health care. It goes double for the Reproductive Freedom Act. We believe that Floridians should be the ones that are making conscious choices about their bodies and their reproductive choices, not politicians. A few bad bills, a few good bills. I will highlight one that right now, actually. Thursday, 289 is House floor. While Floridians are struggling to pay, they're getting kicked off. The bill is being rammed through the House of Representatives. It expands Florida's Wrongful Death Act to apply to fertilized eggs. The law, fertilized eggs and embryos the same as actual living people. Cascading and far-reaching 1 in 4 pregnancies. And these aren't just hypothetical scenarios. In Texas, when a similar law was passed, an abuser sued 3 of his $1 million each after they. In Alabama, a similar law had devastating consequences that led to IVF services being temporarily shut down around the state. So we are going to be working throughout this session to not only protect, but promote the constitutional rights and civil liberties of all people in Florida.
How'd you kill that? I don't know about y'all. I grew up in the Kojic church, and one thing about me is I know I'm in the right place when I'm fighting, saying amen after multiple times that y'all points that you made. Genesis, thank you again. You named it. There are over 2,000 bills that are proposed here. Justice Over Everything is dedicated to being in coalition with all of you here, and I know that the only way that we are going to cover 2,000 bills is in coalition with each other. But we are incredibly committed to the Harry T. and Harriet V. More Voting Rights Act. We also are really committed to food security, talking very specifically what does it look like to address food deserts in the spaces that we are at. How are our neighbors accessing food, and not the convenience store or the bodegas that you may know, but getting access to fresh produce, and what is the process to getting it, how long it takes to get on a bus to make it to a grocery store to be able to afford the fresh produce and not spend 2,000 US American dollars to make it back. Justice Over Everything is also prioritizing public health over culture wars, recognizing that the expanding HIV prevention and care, while federal dollars have been reduced for HIV education and care, I hope funding and legislative support for testing, PrEP access, prevention education, community health programs persistent here in Florida. My hope is that Florida's high HIV burden, particularly among young adults, Black and brown folk, it demands action. That we sustain growth and community-based services like those provided by nonprofits. And Pinellas, shout out to them. I know they are doing the Lord's work. Also in Orlando, they are pushing the bounds where they can. We also need to continue to work towards decriminalizing HIV with bills like Senate Bill 764, the HIV Prevention Justice Act, that looks to reduce the degree of criminality for people looking to donate blood or plasma, organ, skin, or human tissues to another person. That public health is a shared responsibility. Demonizing or even criminalizing communities while health outcomes worsen is simply unacceptable. That we are leaning into inclusive and truthful education. That we oppose expansion of laws that censors Black and brown LGBTQ identities or erase their lived experience from curricula. Slavery was not good. Just, I don't know where that came from. It won't. And we want to continue to push back on those things. I want our students to be educated in truth and not erasure. To that point, we oppose bills like HB 173 designed to reduce support for students or who are at school, reduce support for students at school, or remove the ability for trained credentialed professionals to provide timely treatment. We're looking to support policies that ensure schools can teach accurate history and create safe, supportive environments for all students. That includes, again, the intersectional identities that exist here in the state of Florida. Similarly, we want our students to stay in school and reduce discrimination. So supporting Senate Bill 252, the Creating a Respectful and Open World for Natural Hair Act, or the Crown Act, prohibiting discrimination based on protected hairstyles against students in the K-20 public education system. We need to make sure that we are not punishing students for the way that their hair grows out of their head, or the styles that are very connected to racialized identities. And last but not least, affirming intersectional equity. Equity is not a special interest. It is the infrastructure of a healthy state. Health, education, racial justice, gender equity, disability access, economic opportunity, and LGBTQ affirmation are not competing priorities. They're interconnected conditions for a thriving Florida. When we protect our community, we strengthen the whole. And the true measure of a state is not how loudly we wage culture wars, but how faithful we are to those that have been pushed to the margins. And it is in that vein that we continue to push forward, because that is what real leadership demands.
Thank you. My name is Jessica Lominer again. I'm with the League of Women Voters of Florida. Our mission is to empower voters and defend democracy, and we have three kind of high-level legislative priorities that we're going to be pursuing this session. The first is to oppose efforts to make it harder for eligible citizens to vote or to register to vote. The second is to support adequate funding for elections administration in order to ensure free and fair and transparent elections. And the third is to uphold the Fair Districts amendments to the state constitution, which prohibit partisan gerrymandering. And those are the priorities that I'm going to be talking about today. Many of them have been referenced today by my colleagues up here. So I'll focus primarily on redistricting. So last week, the governor issued a proclamation to convene a special session on redistricting, and the Florida legislature seems poised to engage in an unprecedented mid-cycle redistricting effort. Partisan gerrymandering is illegal in Florida. Section 20 of our state constitution states, in establishing congressional district boundaries, no apportionment plan or individual district shall be drawn with the intent to favor or disfavor a political party or an incumbent. That's pretty clear. That's pretty clear, right? These words were placed in the state constitution in 2020 when 62% of Floridians approved the Fair Districts amendments, effectively showing career politicians that Floridians have a deep stake in keeping our elections free and fair and kind of off limits from partisan influence. Could not have been more clear that that was the voters' intent in 2010. The U.S. Constitution requires reapportionment every 10 years following a national census. After the most recent census, Florida was assigned 28 congressional seats. There has not been a new census conducted since 2020. There have been rumors that there may be a new census. There has not been a new census conducted since 2020. And Florida has not been assigned any new seats beyond its current 28. There is also no active court order requiring the Florida legislature to redraw the current map. Although the current congressional map is not one that the League of Women Voters of Florida supported, many of us opposed that map when it was proposed and passed. It was ultimately upheld by the court system, and there is no legal order that necessitates it being redrawn at this time. Redistricting is incredibly expensive to taxpayers. Previous redistricting cycles have cost Floridians millions in taxpayer dollars for staff, consultant, and attorney time, not to mention opportunity costs in terms of misplaced focus and productivity. Florida residents expect their elected leaders to focus on the kitchen table issues affecting voters' daily lives, not diverting millions in taxpayer dollars to a rushed and unconstitutional redistricting process. Despite what other states like Texas, California, Louisiana may do, Florida has an explicit prohibition on partisan map making, and Florida legislators have all sworn an oath to support and defend both the U.S. and the Florida constitutions. We expect them to do that, and the overwhelming majority of Floridians do as well. Stay tuned.
Thank you for that. So looking at our legislative priorities, many of them have already been uplifted by many of our partners that are sitting here, many organizations that are sitting here today. We are centrally focused on the redistricting efforts. As stated in my statement earlier, we have already done a report with Fair Fight Action around how the Louisiana versus Claes decision will not only affect us from a congressional standpoint, but seeks to affect us from a state legislative standpoint as well. And so that is something that we are centrally focused on. Also, of course, we're one of many organizations, and I feel like I'm beating same drum when I say that we're one of many organizations in favor of the passing of the Florida Voting Rights Act, the Harry T. and Harriet B. Moore Voting Rights Act. But we also are keeping a central focus on SB 1406, which is being sponsored by Senator Carlos Guillermo Smith and looking to lower the voter approval threshold for constitutional amendments from 60% to a simple majority, making it easier for voters to pass reforms. Um, Knowing that there is an attack on how we even gather petitions for constitutional amendments, I think it would be very um, befitting for us to pass an amendment to lower the threshold for these constitutional amendments, considering we're one of many states that do constitutional amendments, but we're one of the few states that has the hardest measures of being able to pass constitutional amendments in this country. And so, in looking at that, these are some of our advocacy strategies that we have and making sure that we uplift a lot of the legislative priorities that we have. Of course, Black Voters Matter, we are a capacity building organization. So we have many partners on the ground that are doing a lot of the work alongside us. We pride ourselves in stating that Equal Ground Education Fund has been one of our legacy partners in the work that we've been doing in Florida. And we're overjoyed to also have Justice Over Everything as one of our partners as well in the work that we're doing in the state of Florida. So these are a lot of our issue campaigns that we have as far as our advocacy strategies. We have the Sick and Tired campaign, which seeks to mobilize Black communities across the South to demand Medicaid expansion, address healthcare inequities, and hold political leaders accountable for their role in maintaining systemic health disparities. We also have the Block is Hot campaign, which is our environmental justice campaign that tackles the following issues that have a devastating impact on our Black communities: clean air and water, food access, housing quality, and utilities and infrastructure. Clean air and water, meaning unsafe drinking water, air pollution, and toxic exposure. Food access, as Dr. Byron had stated, food deserts, junk food swaps, and the right to fresh produce. That is something that we'll be working extensively close with Justice Over Everything on. Housing quality, energy inefficient, unhealthy housing with rising costs, and utilities and infrastructure, which are high bills, frequent shutoffs, and unfair policies. We have our Take the Field initiative, which empowers young people on college campuses to become active participants in a political process, incorporating leadership development, organizing training, social media amplification, resource support, and networking. We have a lot of Take the Field partners on our college campuses, whether it be HBCUs or PWIs, that we give mini grant funding and a lot of other resources to essentially do the work on college campuses to not only do voter registration, but also voter education and voter advocacy and engagement. And of course, our GOTV voter engagement work, which is building Black political power by meeting our people where they are through education, resources, and organizing tools that connect everyday issues to the ballot. Those are our priorities, legislative priorities, as well as advocacy strategies that we are utilizing in 2026 to help restore Florida for Black people who want to live authentically in this state.
Once again, I'm Natasha Sutherland with Florida Watch. And so, for us, we understand a couple of things. First, that real freedom comes from the ability to thrive, and having financial freedom is actually foundational to your ability to thrive. And also that being truly free means having safe water to drink, clean air to breathe, living in an environment that actually keeps you healthy rather than making you sick. And so, this legislative session, Florida Watch will continue to be laser focused on supporting policies that are going to bring down costs for working families and seniors, that are going to protect our natural environment and treasures for generations to come, and that are also going to hold those in power accountable for basically abusing public trust for their own benefit. And so our organization stands ready to always be the voice for those who work hard and their hard work isn't being rewarded by a state that is built to actually favor the wealthy and the well-connected. We will stand with our partners to organize, speak out, and provide accountability whenever lawmakers forget who they are actually here to serve. They're here to serve the hardworking Floridians and seniors who truly power our state. It's our hope that legislators will recognize that our state is facing an historic affordability crisis and accountability crisis, and the time for petty politics really needs to end today. People who are working hard to pay the bills every month really don't have time for more manufactured crises or more distractions, and they certainly don't have time for the handouts that are being given to the greedy few who are writing those big fat campaign checks. We simply cannot afford another year, after 8 years under this governor, of rising costs, stagnant wages, and fewer opportunities every single day. Every day, Floridians work hard, we play by the rules, we do the right thing, and so we deserve to see our hard work actually pay off with the chance to live our version of the American dream. And so at Florida Watch, we'll be here keeping watch and ready to stand up to anyone who tries to get in your way. Thank you.
Thank you, Natasha, and thank you again to each and every one for your participation. I know the hour is short and we're getting ready to close out. And in our closing, I'm going to ask our partners if you could just deliver a quick 30-second close, as well as a general awareness on how folks can stay in touch with you all and follow your organizations. So again, 30 seconds if you can limit it. Thank you.
Put on your armor, strap up your boots, show up, bring whatever weapons that you may have, literally, and come to the state capitol to engage in this fight. If you can't be here, monitor the passage of bills on the Florida channel, reach out to any of the organizations here. Everyone has a web page, everyone has their contact information on it. It is vitally important that you, as voting citizens of the state of Florida, engage in this fight. This is your Florida.
Again, Letitia Harmon. I'm the Senior Director of Policy and Research at Florida Rising. And if any of those priorities that I mentioned earlier resonate with you, if you are about protecting voting rights and expanding democracy, if you are interested in holding investor-owned utility companies accountable and keeping your utilities affordable, if you are interested in protecting the immigrant families in Florida, I would encourage you to go to floridarising.org and indicate your interest in those campaigns there. Additionally, if you're interested in knowing about judicial nominations and participating in a judicial integrity campaign, that is something you can indicate on floridarising.org as well, and we would welcome your participation.
So I would say this session is about people or profits. It's about you or it's about corporate interests. And it's all determined on how we fight for ourselves and for our future. The Florida Education Association has a website, feaweb.org, where you can find more information on our agenda and what we're trying to do and keep track of a lot of legislation moving through the legislature. You can also find us on Facebook, FEA is not on TikTok. I'm on TikTok, Andrew Spar on TikTok or Facebook or Twitter or Blue Sky or Instagram, but you can also find FEA on Blue Sky, or Facebook or Twitter or Instagram.
Thanks. The Southern Poverty Law Center's website is splcenter.org. It's pretty expansive. I definitely recommend you check that out. We also have an email list, which you can sign up on. But I would encourage you in any way you can to get involved with this legislative session, sending emails, making phone calls, showing up to in-district meetings, whatever you can possibly do over the next 60 days. It's all hands on deck moment for Florida, so please join the larger chorus here. SPLC is also on the various social media outlets. I actually think our Instagram is a pretty good way to stay involved, so check us out there. Thanks so much.
Thanks. Yes, we've been hearing from everybody. We definitely need the voice of the people to be heard in Tallahassee this session. If you are interested in learning more about how our democracy works, in defending it, and in helping it be a better, more inclusive democracy for all Floridians, please visit us at commoncause.org/Florida. You can sign up for action alerts, or you can also follow our Instagram at commoncausefl. Thanks.
We're at a pivotal time in our country and our state. And so if you are looking around and wondering what the heck is going on, you're not alone. And just know that the enemies of freedom and the ones who seek to harm our democracy, they think that they're inevitable, but nothing is inevitable. And history is written by those who are willing to fight and scratch and struggle until they win. And I believe we will, because there are so many more of us who want freedom and justice and equality for everyone than there are those who seek to do people harm. So follow us at ACLUFL on all social media. Visit aclufl.org and sign up for our email list, sign up for text alerts, and and learn how you can get involved in these fights. Thank you.
We want to make it real clear. We are Justice Over Everything on Instagram. We're also on TikTok. Give me grace on TikTok. We're figuring it out. But we're also on Facebook. But we want you to get involved. We want you to come up here and give public testimony. If you have never given public testimony, we have coaches to help you develop your message to be concise, to give that testimony at 5 minutes, at 3 minutes, at 2 minutes, because at the drop of a hat, they could change the rules about how long you have to present. If you were like, hey, I can't afford to come up to Tallahassee, we will also help walk you through how to give testimony online. We want your voices heard. But if you were like, Byron, that's too much, Justice Over Everything, along with some of my coalition members, are coming to you. Right after session, we are hosting a statewide tour where we are going to be going all around the state, talking to you about what happened in Tallahassee. So if you say, I can't make it there, we're bringing it to you. And we want to talk to you about what's happening. We want you to be involved. We want you to be engaged, not only at the state level, but in your community, because we know that health equity increases when you get involved. So your life expectancy is going to increase by getting involved with these organizations. So find us on social media, find us on justiceovereverything.com. We want to talk to you, and we want to see you right after session when we come to a city near you.
Thank you. So folks who are interested in getting involved with the League of Women Voters of Florida, we have 35 local leagues all across the state, all the way from Pensacola down to the Keys. So I promise there is a local league near you, and we would love for you to join. You can join at lwvfl.org. And then I also echo the comments about getting involved and coming up here to Tallahassee, coming up here to observe the session, to testify in committee, and to see the process in action. Do not bring weapons, but bring your, we want to be clear about that. We are not advocating for that. But bring yourself and bring your talking points and bring your curiosity and also your desire to be a courageous citizen, because we definitely need you here at the Capitol, and the legislators need to hear your voice and your opinion, because there are not enough kind of regular folk who come up to the Capitol on a regular basis. You will be very, very welcome here. Please.
One of the calls to action I would like to pose to our constituents is just asking yourself the question of what would the state of Florida look like if Black people were able to live in freedom, equity, and authenticity. And if that vision that you have does not fit the current vision of what the state of Florida really is, then come check us out at Black Voters MTR on all social media. That's Black Voters MTR. Or check us out as well at Black Voters Matter Fund, UND, Black Matter Fund.org. We are very happy, very excited to be alongside Equal Ground on February the 3rd and 4th for the days at the Capitol. So come check out some of the other organizations during that time for their day at the Capitol. And also just come up here yourself. As been stated before, there are people that can help train you in how to do public comment, how to give public testimony, but just come and be a part of this great process. Thank you.
So Florida Watch, watch.org, and we are on all social media platforms at Florida Watch. So the only other thing that I would the wonderful action and suggestions that are watching is not let folks divide and distract us. Get to know your neighbors. Know who's in your community. Local coffee shop, local restaurant. Make friends with people that you live and work with every going happening. So sure that you're getting out and getting to power are not able to lie to us about our differences, and we have more in common.
So much again to everyone for joining us today. I want to again thank our partners, our ally and movement partners, and leaders in the room for showing up, continuing to show up. I know the ground beneath us continues to shift, but every day you all strap up and you come to work committed not only to the organizations that you all are employed by, but really to the people of this state. And your advocacy makes a difference, and I'm proud to stand alongside you all in this fight. This session, we want all the Floridians to know that we will be present. We will be here tracking bills, meeting with lawmakers, and sounding the alarm when necessary. But this work does not only live inside the Capitol. It lives in communities and classrooms and union halls and faith spaces and living rooms across this state. And that's why we need you to stay with us, to stay engaged and stay connected. For our part at Equal Ground, we ask that you sign up for our newsletter. You can visit our website, equal-ground.com. We ask that you follow us on social media at Equal Ground Florida on all social media platforms. And if you want to have your boots on the ground, I know that's a famous saying these days, you can join us in Tallahassee on February 3rd and 4th for Equal Ground Day at the Capitol. And so in closing, I want to say that we are here because we know that the system can't fix itself. We're here because history has shown us that whenever we need to fix a problem, democracy only bends towards justice when people force it to do so. And so what happens next depends on whether we treat this moment with the seriousness that it demands, because we certainly cannot afford complacency, we cannot afford fragmentation, and we certainly cannot afford silence. Florida's future and the people of it are depending on us, and we intend to be a part of that solution. Thank you all for joining us today, and that concludes our Social Justice and Democracy Roundtable.